8 former CIA officers in the United States have been convicted and sentenced to prison for serious crimes, including espionage, sexual assault, and deadly abuse. These aren't foreign agents or outside threats. These are America's own intelligence operatives who swore an oath to protect national security only to become the very criminals they were trained to catch. The sentences tell a shocking story. From a single day behind bars to life imprisonment without parole. One officer sold out his country for millions, causing the execution of at least 10 American assets. Another leaked the CIA's most sensitive cyber weapons to WikiLeaks in the largest intelligence breach in agency history. A third drugged and sexually assaulted over 24 women across multiple continents while serving overseas. Welcome to Savage Case Files, where we expose the dark truth behind America's most classified betrayals. These cases represent more than individual failures. They reveal catastrophic breakdowns within the world's most powerful intelligence agency. From Soviet spies who walked into enemy embassies with classified files, to predators who used diplomatic immunity to commit heinous crimes, to contractors who beat detainees to death in foreign prisons. Today we reveal the betrayals, the crimes, the legal battles, and the disturbing truths behind America's most trusted guardians turned criminals. Each case exposes how personal greed, ideological corruption, and unchecked power transformed patriots into prisoners. Case by case, we expose how those sworn to protect America became its greatest internal threats. From the CIA officer who received nearly $3 million from the KGB, to the cyber expert who handed America's digital weapons to the world, to the station chief who turned government safe houses into assault chambers. These aren't just stories of individual corruption. They're warnings about what happens when those with access to our deepest secrets choose personal gain over national duty. The consequences weren't just prison sentences. Lives were lost. Operations were destroyed. America's intelligence capabilities were crippled for years. The question isn't just how these trusted officers fell so far, it's whether the systems designed to prevent such betrayals are strong enough to stop the next one. Case 1. Aldrich Ames. In the shadowed halls of the CIA, betrayal was brewing. Not from an outsider, but from one of their own. His actions would cost lives, destroy decades of intelligence work, and expose one of the worst security breaches in American history. Aldrich Ames seemed destined for a career in intelligence. Born in 1941 in River Falls, Wisconsin, he was the son of a CIA analyst. By age 22, Aldrich himself had joined the agency. Despite a mediocre academic record, he found himself moving through the ranks, thanks in part to his family connections and his deep understanding of espionage operations. Early in his career, Aldrich specialized in Soviet counterintelligence, the very field he would later betray. He spent years learning the intricacies of how spies operated, building contacts and developing an image of a competent, if not particularly remarkable agent. But warning signs were already emerging. Aldrich had a serious drinking problem, a chaotic personal life, and mounting financial troubles. His first marriage deteriorated under the weight of his alcoholism and constant overseas postings. By the early 1980s, he was remarried, this time to Rosario Casas Dupuy, a Colombian diplomat who enjoyed a lifestyle far beyond the means of a mid-level CIA officer. The bills were piling up, the pressure was mounting, and Aldrich made a fateful decision. In 1985, Aldrich walked into the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C., and offered his services to the KGB, the Soviet Union's main security agency. His motivation was simple. He wanted money. For $50,000, Aldrich handed over the names of Soviet citizens who were secretly spying for the United States. It was a devastating blow to U.S. intelligence. Within months, nearly every Soviet asset working with the CIA was rounded up, imprisoned, or executed. And that was just the beginning. Over the next 9 years, Aldrich sold out virtually every Soviet source the CIA had. In total, he received over $2,700,000 from the KGB, the most money any American spy had ever earned at that point. He lived lavishly, buying a $540,000 house in Arlington, Virginia, paying for expensive cars, jewelry, and private schooling for his stepchildren, all while somehow avoiding serious scrutiny from his employers. The cost of his betrayal wasn't just financial or diplomatic, it was fatal. Intelligence estimates suggest that at least 10 U.S. assets were executed as a direct result of his treachery. Many others were imprisoned for life. Each death was a reminder that Aldrich wasn't simply leaking information, he was signing death warrants. Throughout the late 1980s and early 1990s, the CIA realized something was terribly wrong. Dozens of their Soviet contacts had disappeared. Critical operations were collapsing. There had to be a mole. Initially, the CIA suspected several officers, but Aldrich, sloppy, alcoholic, and flamboyantly spending money he shouldn't have had, somehow evaded detection. But the FBI wasn't so easily fooled. In 1993, after years of quiet investigation, they finally turned their focus on Aldrich. They placed him under intense surveillance, following him to meetings, tapping his phones, inspecting his garbage, even sneaking into his home to bug it. What they found was damning. On the morning of February 21, 1994, in a quiet Arlington neighborhood, FBI agents arrested Aldrich Ames and his wife Rosario as they left their home for work. The game was over. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Aldrich quickly confessed. In a plea deal designed to spare his wife a heavy sentence, Aldrich detailed years of espionage activities, the assets he had betrayed, and the money he had received. The scope of his betrayal stunned the intelligence community. In 1994, Aldrich Ames was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His wife Rosario was sentenced to 5 years for her role in concealing the profits of his espionage. Today, Aldrich remains incarcerated at the high-security Federal Correctional Institution in Terre Haute, Indiana. The CIA was humiliated. Congressional hearings tore into the agency's lax security protocols and failure to notice Aldrich's obvious signs of corruption. In the aftermath, the CIA implemented sweeping reforms, stricter financial audits, better counterintelligence practices, and more rigorous internal oversight. But the damage Aldrich inflicted could never be fully undone. Lives were lost, trust was shattered, and America's intelligence network in the Soviet Union, once robust and thriving, was left in ruins for years. Case 2. Joshua Schulte. Joshua Schulte was a computer prodigy who had become responsible for the most damaging intelligence leak in CIA history. But his betrayal of national secrets was only the beginning of a much darker story. Born in 1988 in Lubbock, Texas, Schulte demonstrated an early aptitude for computers that would eventually land him at the heart of America's cyber warfare operations. After graduating from the University of Texas at Austin with a degree in computer engineering, he joined the CIA in 2010 with high hopes and impressive credentials. At the CIA's Engineering Development Group, Schulte worked on some of the agency's most sensitive projects. He developed sophisticated cyber tools used for intelligence gathering, digital weapons that could hack smartphones, computers, and even smart TVs. These tools represented years of development and millions of dollars in investment, giving the CIA unprecedented surveillance capabilities around the world. However, conflicts with colleagues and growing dissatisfaction with management began to poison Schulte's experience. He clashed repeatedly with supervisors, complained about workplace conditions, and developed a reputation for being difficult to work with. His frustration with the agency grew until he finally resigned in 2016, leaving behind access to some of America's most classified cyber capabilities. What happened next would shock the intelligence community to its core. In March 2017, WikiLeaks began publishing a massive trove of documents known as Vault 7, The leak exposed the CIA's most sensitive cyber espionage methods, revealing how the agency could hack into virtually any electronic device. The documents detailed techniques for turning smartphones into listening devices, accessing encrypted communications, and even taking control of smart televisions to conduct surveillance. The breach was unprecedented, the largest unauthorized release of classified information in CIA history. The leaked documents didn't just embarrass the agency, they rendered years of cyber development useless and gave foreign adversaries a roadmap to America's digital intelligence methods. FBI investigators quickly identified Schulte as the source. He had stolen the massive cache of classified data and transmitted it to WikiLeaks before leaving the agency. But as authorities closed in on him, they discovered something far more disturbing. Schulte's legal troubles began in August 2017, when he was arrested on charges of possessing child pornography. During the investigation of his computers and devices, authorities uncovered over 10,000 images and videos of child sexual abuse material. They also found a photograph on his phone depicting an unconscious woman being sexually assaulted. The investigation revealed a pattern of criminal behavior that went far beyond espionage. Schulte had been collecting and distributing some of the most heinous illegal content, while simultaneously betraying his country's most sensitive secrets. His first trial in 2020 ended in a mistrial on the most serious espionage charges, though he was convicted of contempt of court and making false statements. Prosecutors weren't deterred. A retrial in 2022 resulted in convictions on multiple counts, including espionage and computer hacking. In 2023, Schulte faced additional charges related to the child sexual abuse material found in his possession. The evidence was overwhelming. Thousands of illegal images stored on encrypted devices, along with evidence of distribution to other criminals. On February 1, 2024, Schulte was sentenced to 40 years in federal prison. The judge emphasized that his actions had caused exceptionally grave harm to U.S. national security, compromising intelligence operations, and endangering lives around the world. The CIA estimated that Schulte's breach cost the agency hundreds of millions of dollars and significantly degraded its ability to collect foreign intelligence. Entire cyber programs had to be scrapped and rebuilt. Foreign intelligence services gained insights into American capabilities that took years to develop. But perhaps most disturbing was the combination of crimes. Schulte hadn't just betrayed his country, he had exploited the most vulnerable victims while doing so. His case represents a chilling portrait of how personal corruption can manifest in multiple, devastating ways. Joshua Schulte's betrayal exposed critical vulnerabilities in how the CIA safeguards its most sensitive information. His 40-year sentence reflects not just the severity of his espionage, but the additional horror of his exploitation crimes. Today, he serves as a reminder that insider threats can come in the most unexpected and disturbing forms. Case 3. Brian Jeffrey Raymond. Brian Jeffrey Raymond served the CIA for over 2 decades, completing assignments in at least 25 countries. But behind his professional facade lay a predator who would use his position of trust and diplomatic immunity to commit some of the most heinous crimes in agency history. Raymond's career took him across the globe, from Mexico to Peru and beyond. As a CIA officer stationed overseas, he lived in government-leased residences and enjoyed the privileges that came with diplomatic status. To the outside world, he appeared to be a dedicated intelligence professional serving his country in dangerous locations. But Raymond was living a double life that would eventually destroy dozens of victims across multiple continents. His method was as calculated as it was horrific. Raymond would meet women through dating apps or casual encounters, often targeting those who were vulnerable or unfamiliar with the local area. He would invite them to his government-provided residences, presenting himself as a charming American diplomat. Once his victims arrived, Raymond would offer them wine and snacks, but these refreshments contained a deadly secret. He had laced them with powerful sedatives designed to render his victims unconscious and helpless. After the women lost consciousness, Raymond would sexually assault them while they were completely unable to resist or even remember what was happening. But his crimes didn't end there. He photographed and filmed these assaults, creating a vast library of evidence documenting his attacks. Investigators would later recover over 500 explicit images and videos from Raymond's devices, some dating back to 2006. The evidence revealed a pattern of abuse spanning more than a decade, with victims across multiple countries who had no idea they had been assaulted until authorities showed them the footage. The case that would finally expose Raymond's crimes began on a morning in May 2020 in Mexico City. Residents of an upscale apartment building were startled by the sound of a woman screaming for help from a balcony. The woman was naked and clearly in distress, calling out desperately for assistance. When authorities responded, they found the woman had no memory of how she had ended up in Raymond's apartment. She remembered meeting him and accepting drinks, but everything after that was a complete blank. The woman reported feeling drugged and disoriented, with no recollection of the previous hours. This incident prompted an immediate investigation that would uncover the full scope of Raymond's predatory behavior. As investigators examined his devices and residences, they discovered the horrifying truth about his decade-long crime spree. The evidence was overwhelming. Hundreds of videos and photographs documented assaults on women who appeared unconscious or barely conscious. Many victims were completely unaware they had been attacked until investigators contacted them with the evidence. In November 2023, Raymond pleaded guilty to 4 federal counts: sexual abuse, abusive sexual contact, coercion and enticement, and transportation of obscene material. His guilty plea spared his victims the trauma of a lengthy trial, but it also meant the full extent of his crimes would never be publicly revealed. During his sentencing hearing, 12 victims provided emotional testimonies describing the profound impact of Raymond's actions on their lives. Many spoke of feeling violated not just physically, but psychologically, knowing they had been assaulted while completely helpless. One victim's words captured the horror of Raymond's crimes. "My body looks like a corpse on his bed." The statement highlighted the complete vulnerability of his victims and the predatory nature of his attacks. Raymond was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison, one of the longest sentences ever handed down for such crimes. As part of his punishment, he was ordered to pay $260,000 in restitution to his victims, register as a sex offender for life, and serve a lifetime of supervised release upon his eventual freedom. The CIA publicly condemned Raymond's actions, calling them reprehensible and appalling. The agency emphasized its commitment to addressing sexual misconduct and implemented new reforms aimed at creating safer environments for both its workforce and the communities where officers serve. Raymond's case exposed serious gaps in oversight of CIA personnel stationed overseas. His ability to commit crimes for over a decade while serving in sensitive positions raised questions about background checks, psychological evaluations, and monitoring of officers with diplomatic immunity. Today, Brian Jeffrey Raymond serves his sentence as a reminder that positions of trust and authority can be exploited by those with criminal intent. His 30-year sentence reflects the severity of his crimes and the lasting trauma inflicted on his victims across the globe. Case 4. Jerry Chun-Shing Lee. Jerry Chun-Shing Lee's betrayal would trigger one of the most devastating intelligence disasters in modern American history, leading to the deaths of at least 30 U.S. informants and crippling CIA operations in China for years. Born in Hong Kong, Lee immigrated to Hawaii at age 15 and became a naturalized U.S. citizen with dreams of serving his adopted country. He enlisted in the U.S. Army from 1982 to 1986, then pursued higher education, earning degrees in international business and human resources. His background and language skills made him an attractive candidate for intelligence work. In 1994, Lee joined the CIA as a case officer, holding top-secret clearance and specializing in operations throughout East Asia. For over a decade, he served his country with apparent dedication, building networks of informants and gathering critical intelligence in one of the world's most challenging regions. His colleagues viewed him as a competent professional with valuable cultural insights. Lee left the CIA in 2007 and settled in Hong Kong, where he worked for various private companies. To outside observers, he appeared to be a former intelligence officer transitioning to civilian life. But in April 2010, during what seemed like a routine business trip to Shenzhen, Lee's life took a dramatic turn. Two officers from China's Ministry of State Security approached him with an offer that would change everything. They weren't interested in his business expertise, they wanted his knowledge of CIA operations and personnel. The Chinese intelligence officers offered Lee $100,000 up front and promised lifelong financial support in exchange for sensitive information about American intelligence activities. Lee accepted their proposal, beginning a 3-year relationship that would prove catastrophic for U.S. intelligence operations in China. Between 2010 and 2013, Lee received over $840,000 from Chinese intelligence, depositing these payments into his Hong Kong bank accounts. The money came with a price. Lee provided detailed information about CIA operations, personnel, and methods used to recruit and handle Chinese informants. But the Chinese weren't just paying for historical information. They gave Lee at least 21 specific assignments, requesting details about ongoing CIA operations and the identities of Chinese citizens working with American intelligence. The consequences of Lee's betrayal became apparent almost immediately. Between 2010 and 2012, the CIA experienced a catastrophic loss of human intelligence assets in China. At least 30 informants were killed or imprisoned as Chinese authorities systematically dismantled the American intelligence network. The scale of the disaster was unprecedented. Informants who had risked their lives to provide intelligence to the United States were rounded up, interrogated, and in many cases, executed. Years of careful relationship building and intelligence gathering were destroyed virtually overnight. CIA officers watched helplessly as their carefully constructed networks collapsed. Operations that had taken years to develop were compromised within months. The agency's ability to gather intelligence in China, one of America's most important strategic targets, was severely crippled. Investigators began searching for the source of the breach, examining multiple possibilities, including compromised communication systems and potential moles within the agency. Lee's name emerged as a prime suspect due to his previous access to classified information and his unexplained wealth. In 2012, FBI agents discovered classified materials in Lee's possession, including notebooks containing the names and details of CIA informants. Despite this damning evidence, Lee was not immediately arrested, as investigators continued building their case. The breakthrough came in January 2018 when Lee returned to the United States and was arrested at JFK Airport in New York. He was initially charged with unlawful retention of national defense information, but prosecutors later added more serious espionage charges. During the investigation, authorities uncovered the full extent of Lee's financial relationship with Chinese intelligence. Bank records showed regular deposits totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars, far exceeding what Lee could have earned through legitimate business activities. In May 2019, facing overwhelming evidence, Lee pleaded guilty to conspiracy to deliver national defense information to aid a foreign government. His admission confirmed what investigators had long suspected, that he had been the source of one of the most damaging intelligence breaches in recent history. In November 2019, Lee was sentenced to 19 years in federal prison. Prosecutors emphasized the severity of his betrayal, noting the substantial payments he received and the devastating impact on U.S. intelligence operations and human assets. Interestingly, Li maintained during his sentencing that while he had conspired to provide information to Chinese officials, he claimed he never actually transmitted the most sensitive details. However, the evidence of dead and imprisoned informants suggested otherwise. Li's case highlighted the ongoing challenges of counterintelligence and the persistent efforts by foreign governments to recruit former U.S. intelligence officers. His betrayal contributed to one of the most significant intelligence failures in decades, demonstrating how a single individual with access to sensitive information can cause damage that lasts for years. Case 5. Alexander Yuqing Ma. Alexander Yuqing Ma's espionage case represents one of the most brazen acts of betrayal in recent CIA history. A former officer who sold his country's secrets to China and then had the audacity to work for the FBI while under investigation. Born in British Hong Kong in 1952, Ma immigrated to the United States in 1968 and became a naturalized citizen in 1975. His path to intelligence work seemed natural given his language skills and cultural background. In 1982, he joined the CIA as a clandestine officer, serving in Far East operations before resigning in 1989. What made Ma's case particularly disturbing was that espionage ran in the family. His older brother David had also served in the CIA from 1967 to 1983, giving both siblings access to some of America's most sensitive intelligence operations in Asia. The brothers' betrayal began in March 2001, when they traveled to Hong Kong for what appeared to be a routine visit. But this trip had a far more sinister purpose. In a Hong Kong hotel room, Alexander and David Ma met with officers from China's Shanghai State Security Bureau, the regional arm of China's intelligence apparatus. During this meeting, the Ma brothers provided classified information about CIA personnel, operations, and communication techniques. They revealed details about how the agency recruited assets, conducted surveillance, and maintained secure communications in the region. In exchange for these secrets, they received $50,000 in cash. The meeting was partially videotaped by Chinese intelligence, capturing Alexander Ma counting the money he received from his handlers. This footage would later become crucial evidence in his prosecution, providing undeniable proof of his treasonous activities. But Alexander Ma's espionage activities were far from over. In 2004, he applied for a position as a contract linguist with the FBI's Honolulu field office. What Ma didn't know was that the FBI was already aware of his ties to Chinese intelligence and hired him as part of an elaborate ruse to monitor his activities. From August 2004 to October 2012, Ma worked part-time for the FBI while secretly continuing his espionage activities. He regularly copied, photographed, and stole classified documents from his workplace, building an extensive collection of sensitive materials. Ma's pattern was methodical and brazen. He would travel frequently to China, bringing stolen documents to his Chinese handlers and returning with thousands of dollars in cash and expensive gifts, including golf clubs. Each trip represented another betrayal of American intelligence operations and personnel. The FBI's patience in allowing Ma to continue his activities while under surveillance paid off in gathering evidence. They documented his travels, his unexplained wealth, and his continued contact with Chinese intelligence officers over nearly a decade. In January 2019, the FBI decided to test Ma's loyalty one final time. An undercover agent posing as a Chinese intelligence officer arranged to meet with him. During this meeting, Ma confirmed his past espionage activities and expressed his continued willingness to assist China. "I want the motherland to succeed," Ma told the undercover agent, revealing where his true loyalties lay, even after decades of living in America. He accepted $2,000 from the agent as what he believed was appreciation for his past services, not knowing he was sealing his own fate. Ma was arrested on August 14, 2020, and charged with conspiracy to gather or deliver national defense information to a foreign government. His brother David was identified as an unindicted co-conspirator, but prosecutors determined he was unfit to stand trial due to advanced Alzheimer's disease. Facing the possibility of life imprisonment, Ma entered into a plea agreement with federal prosecutors. On May 24, 2024, he pleaded guilty to the charges in exchange for a 10-year prison sentence. The agreement also required him to cooperate fully with U.S. authorities for the rest of his life. As part of his ongoing cooperation, Ma must submit to polygraph examinations whenever requested by U.S. intelligence agencies. This lifetime requirement ensures that authorities can continue to assess the full extent of his betrayal and gather intelligence about Chinese espionage operations. During his sentencing hearing in September 2024, Ma expressed what appeared to be genuine remorse. "I hope God and America will forgive me for what I have done," he told the court. Without the plea deal, he could have faced life imprisonment. Ma was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison, a relatively light sentence that reflected his cooperation with authorities and his advanced age. At 72, the sentence effectively ensures he will spend his remaining productive years behind bars. Ma's case underscores the persistent threat of espionage and the vulnerabilities within U.S. intelligence agencies. His actions compromised sensitive information about CIA sources, operations, and communication methods, posing significant risks to national security and the lives of intelligence assets. The case also highlights the challenges in detecting insider threats, especially when individuals exploit positions of trust within intelligence organizations. Even in his 70s, Ma's loyalty remained with what he called the motherland, rather than the country that had given him citizenship and opportunity. Case 6. John Kiriakou. John Kiriakou's story raises one of the most controversial questions in modern intelligence history. When does revealing classified information make someone a patriot, and when does it make them a traitor? Born in 1964 in Sharon, Pennsylvania, Kiriakou built his career on service and intellect. After earning degrees from George Washington University, he was recruited by the Central Intelligence Agency in 1990. Over the next 14 years, he rose through the ranks, specializing in counterterrorism and Middle East operations, gaining first-hand experience in some of the world's most volatile regions. Kiriakou served in Greece and throughout the Middle East, building a reputation as a dedicated officer. After the September 11th attacks, he became part of the CIA's expanded counterterrorism efforts, working on some of the most sensitive operations in the agency's war against al-Qaeda. In 2002, Kiriakou played a crucial role in one of the CIA's most significant captures. He was involved in the operation that led to the arrest of Abu Zubaydah, one of al-Qaeda's senior operatives and a key figure in the terrorist organization's planning structure. The capture was hailed as a major victory in the fight against terrorism. But Kiriakou's involvement in the Abu Zubaydah case also exposed him to something that would fundamentally change his perspective on his work and his country. In the early 2000s, the U.S. government quietly authorized controversial new methods to extract information from terror suspects. These enhanced interrogation techniques included waterboarding, stress positions, sleep deprivation, and other tactics that many would later classify as torture. Though Kiriakou did not personally participate in the interrogations, he was aware of the methods being used on Abu Zubaydah and other high-value detainees. The knowledge of these techniques began to weigh heavily on his conscience as he questioned whether America was compromising its values in the name of security. By 2004, disillusioned with the CIA's direction and suffering from what he described as moral fatigue, Kiriakou left the agency and moved into the private sector. But he couldn't shake what he knew about the government's use of torture. On December 10, 2007, Kiriakou made a decision that would define the rest of his life. During an interview with ABC News, he publicly confirmed for the first time that the United States had engaged in waterboarding. His statement was direct and uncompromising. "We're Americans, and we're better than this. Torture is wrong." The interview sent shockwaves through the intelligence community and the broader public. For the first time, a former CIA officer had publicly acknowledged that the U.S. government was using torture techniques on prisoners. Some praised Kyriakou as a whistleblower, courageously speaking truth to power, while others within the government saw him as a traitor who had revealed classified methods. The walls began closing in on Kyriakou almost immediately. In 2009, the Justice Department launched an investigation, focusing not primarily on his ABC interview, but on a series of classified leaks that seemed connected to his public appearance. Investigators zeroed in on private conversations Kyriakou had with journalists, where he allegedly disclosed the identity of a covert CIA officer and provided information about another agent's role in the controversial interrogation program. Under the Intelligence Identities Protection Act, such revelations could carry severe penalties. In 2012, federal prosecutors brought charges against Kyriakou that could have resulted in decades in prison. He faced 5 felony counts, including violating the Intelligence Identities Protection Act, making false statements, and providing classified information to unauthorized individuals. Facing the possibility of spending the rest of his life behind bars, Kyriakou ultimately agreed to a plea deal. In October 2012, he pleaded guilty to 1 count of violating the Intelligence Identities Protection Act by confirming the name of a covert officer to a journalist. In exchange, prosecutors dropped the other charges. The sentence was 30 months in federal prison, making Kyriakou the first CIA officer ever imprisoned for leaking classified information to the media. The irony was not lost on observers. No CIA official was ever prosecuted for the use of torture itself, only Kyriakou for revealing it. In January 2013, Kyriakou reported to the Federal Correctional Institution in Loretto, Pennsylvania. His imprisonment became a rallying point for whistleblower advocates who argued that he was being punished for exposing government wrongdoing rather than committing a crime. Kyriakou was released to a halfway house in February 2015, having served most of his sentence. Since his release, he has remained an outspoken critic of U.S. intelligence practices, continuing to argue that his actions were those of a principled whistleblower, not a reckless leaker. He has authored several books, including The Reluctant Spy and Doing Time Like a Spy, his memoir about surviving prison as a former intelligence officer. His supporters continue to see him as a casualty of an unforgiving system that punishes truth-tellers, while critics maintain that leaking classified information, regardless of motive, endangers lives and operations. Today, Kyriakou advocates for stronger whistleblower protections and greater transparency within the intelligence community, causes that remain deeply divisive in America's post-9/11 security landscape. Case 7. David Passaro. David Passaro holds a unique and disturbing distinction in the annals of American intelligence history. He is the only person ever prosecuted for post-9/11 detainee abuse, despite widespread reports of torture and mistreatment in U.S. detention facilities around the world. Unlike the other cases we've examined, Passaro wasn't technically a CIA officer. He was a contractor working for the agency, but his actions in a remote Afghan outpost would make him the sole individual held criminally accountable for the abuse that occurred during America's war on terror. In 2003, Passaro was working as a CIA contractor at a forward operating base in Afghanistan, one of countless facilities where suspected terrorists and insurgents were brought for interrogation. The environment was tense, dangerous, and largely unsupervised, creating conditions where abuse could flourish without oversight. The incident that would destroy Passaro's life occurred during the interrogation of an Afghan detainee. What exactly happened in that interrogation room remains partially classified, but the consequences were clear. The detainee died as a result of injuries sustained during questioning. Military investigators launched an inquiry into the death, uncovering evidence that Pissarro had physically assaulted the prisoner during interrogation. The investigation revealed a pattern of abuse that went beyond acceptable interrogation techniques, even by the loosened standards of the post-9/11 era. Federal prosecutors decided to make an example of Pissarro, charging him with assault resulting in death, a serious federal crime that carried significant prison time. The decision to prosecute was controversial within intelligence circles, where many felt that Pissarro was being scapegoated for systemic problems in detention and interrogation practices. The case went to trial, where prosecutors presented evidence of Pissarro's violent treatment of the detainee. They argued that his actions went far beyond any authorized interrogation techniques and directly caused the prisoner's death. Pissarro's defense team argued that he was operating in an impossible situation, following orders and trying to extract information that could save American lives. They contended that the chaotic conditions of wartime detention facilities made it difficult to determine exactly what constituted appropriate behavior. The jury ultimately convicted Pissarro of assault, but acquitted him of the more serious manslaughter charges. The verdict reflected the complex moral and legal questions surrounding detention practices during the War on Terror. In 2007, Pissarro was sentenced to 8 years and 4 months in federal prison. The sentence was significant not just for its length, but for what it represented. The only criminal conviction related to the widespread abuse of detainees in U.S. custody during the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. The historical significance of Pissarro's case cannot be overstated. Despite documented cases of torture and abuse at facilities like Abu Ghraib, Guantanamo Bay, and numerous CIA black sites around the world, Pissarro remained the sole individual to face criminal prosecution for detainee abuse. His conviction highlighted a troubling accountability gap in America's war on terror. While low-level soldiers faced court-martial for abuses at Abu Ghraib, and contractors like Pissarro were prosecuted for deaths in custody, higher-level officials who authorized torture programs faced no criminal consequences. The case also raised questions about the use of contractors in sensitive intelligence operations. Pissarro's status as a contractor rather than a direct CIA employee complicated questions of oversight, training, and accountability in detention facilities. Pissarro served his sentence largely out of the public eye, becoming a footnote in the broader story of America's post-9/11 detention practices. His case serves as a reminder of the moral and legal complexities that emerged from the War on Terror, where the lines between acceptable and criminal behavior became dangerously blurred. The broader context of Pissarro's prosecution, or lack thereof for others, remains a source of controversy. Critics argue that his conviction was a token gesture designed to deflect attention from systemic problems in U.S. detention practices, while supporters contend that he received appropriate punishment for crossing legal and moral boundaries. Today, David Pissarro's name serves as a singular example of criminal accountability in an era when such accountability was rare. His 8-year sentence stands as both punishment for his individual actions and a symbol of the broader failures in oversight and accountability that characterized America's detention practices during the War on Terror. Case 8. Donald J. Asquith. Donald J. Asquith's case represents the lightest sentence on our list, but it exposes a troubling pattern of misconduct within the CIA that goes far beyond individual criminal behavior. The incident that would end Asquith's intelligence career occurred at what should have been a routine CIA workplace gathering. During an office party, an event meant to build camaraderie among colleagues, Asquith committed sexual assault and battery against a fellow CIA employee. The details of the assault remain largely sealed in court records, but the charges tell a clear story. Asquith used the social setting of a workplace event to commit crimes against a colleague who trusted him as a professional peer. The victim, whose identity has been protected, was assaulted by someone she worked alongside in one of America's most sensitive government agencies. What makes Asquith's case particularly significant isn't the severity of his individual actions, but what it reveals about workplace culture within the CIA. The fact that such an incident could occur at an official agency function suggests deeper problems with how the intelligence community handles interpersonal conduct and professional boundaries. The legal proceedings moved relatively quickly compared to other cases involving CIA personnel. Asquith was charged with sexual assault and battery, but prosecutors pursued these as misdemeanor rather than felony charges. This decision would prove controversial, as many observers felt the charges didn't adequately reflect the seriousness of workplace sexual assault. Asquith ultimately pleaded guilty to the misdemeanor charges, avoiding a trial that could have exposed more details about the incident and potentially embarrassed the CIA further. His guilty plea resulted in a sentence that shocked many observers, just 1 day in jail followed by probation. The sentence of a single day behind bars represents one of the most lenient punishments ever handed down for sexual assault charges involving a federal employee. Critics argued that the light sentence sent a dangerous message about how seriously the justice system takes workplace sexual assault, particularly within sensitive government agencies. The contrast between Asquith's sentence and those of other CIA officers is stark. While espionage cases resulted in decades or life imprisonment, and other sexual assault cases like Brian Raymond's led to 30-year sentences, Asquith received essentially no meaningful jail time for his crimes. This disparity raises uncomfortable questions about how different types of crimes are prosecuted and punished within the intelligence community. The message seemed to be that betraying national secrets warranted severe punishment, while assaulting colleagues merited little more than a slap on the wrist. Asquith's case also highlighted broader issues with sexual misconduct within the CIA that would continue to surface in subsequent years. His workplace assault wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a pattern of behavior that the agency has struggled to address effectively. The CIA's response to the Asquith case was notably muted compared to their public condemnations of other criminal behavior by their personnel. While the agency has been vocal about condemning espionage and other forms of betrayal, their response to workplace sexual assault has been more restrained. The light sentence also raised questions about whether the CIA's internal disciplinary processes were adequate to address serious misconduct. While Asquith presumably faced administrative consequences within the agency, the minimal criminal punishment suggested that such behavior might not be taken as seriously as other forms of wrongdoing. For the victim in Asquith's case, the light sentence likely felt like a second victimization by a system that failed to take her assault seriously. The message sent by the 1-day jail sentence was that her safety and dignity were worth less than a weekend's inconvenience for her attacker. Asquith's case serves as a reminder that criminal behavior within intelligence agencies isn't limited to dramatic espionage cases or international conspiracies. Sometimes the most harmful actions occur in everyday workplace settings, where colleagues should be able to trust each other with their safety and professional well-being. The contrast between his minimal sentence and the decades-long punishments handed down to other CIA criminals on this list reveals troubling inconsistencies in how the justice system values different types of harm. While national security breaches rightfully receive severe punishment, the light treatment of workplace sexual assault suggests that individual victims may not receive the same level of protection and justice. Today, Donald Asquith's name serves as a footnote in discussions about CIA misconduct, but his case represents something larger: the ongoing challenge of creating safe, professional workplaces within agencies that operate in secrecy and with minimal public oversight. 8 cases, 8 betrayals, 8 reminders that sometimes the greatest threats to American security come not from foreign enemies, but from within the very institutions sworn to protect us. From Aldrich Ames, who sold out his country for $2,700,000 and caused the execution of at least 10 American assets, to Donald Asquith, who received just 1 day in jail for sexually assaulting a colleague at a CIA office party. The range of crimes is as shocking as the disparity in their punishments. These cases expose fundamental vulnerabilities in how America's intelligence agencies recruit, monitor, and discipline their personnel. Joshua Schulte's 40-year sentence for the Vault 7 leak and child exploitation crimes shows how personal corruption can manifest in multiple devastating ways. Brian Raymond's 30-year punishment for drugging and assaulting over 24 women across continents reveals how diplomatic immunity can shield predators from justice for years. The espionage cases, Ames, Lee, and May demonstrate how foreign intelligence services systematically target former and current CIA officers, exploiting financial pressures, personal grievances, and ideological vulnerabilities. Jerry Chun-Shing Lee's $840,000 payday from Chinese intelligence led to the deaths of at least 30 American informants, crippling U.S. operations in one of the world's most critical regions. But perhaps most troubling are the cases that highlight systemic failures in accountability. John Kiriakou received 30 months in prison for revealing torture programs, while no CIA official was ever prosecuted for actually conducting torture. David Pissarro remains the only person criminally convicted for post-9/11 detainee abuse, despite widespread documented cases of torture and mistreatment. These convictions have forced the CIA to implement sweeping reforms, stricter financial audits, enhanced counterintelligence practices, improved psychological evaluations, and better oversight of personnel stationed overseas. But the question remains whether these measures are sufficient to prevent future betrayals. The human cost of these crimes extends far beyond prison sentences. Families of executed informants will never see justice. Victims of sexual assault carry trauma that no court sentence can heal. America's intelligence capabilities in critical regions were set back by years, potentially costing lives and compromising national security in ways we may never fully understand. Each case also raises profound questions about loyalty, duty, and the price of secrecy. What drives trusted guardians to become criminals? Is it greed, ideology, personal grievance, or simply the corrupting influence of unchecked power? How do we balance the need for secrecy in intelligence work with the accountability necessary to prevent abuse? The sentences handed down, ranging from 1 day to life imprisonment, reflect not just the severity of individual crimes, but society's struggle to define appropriate punishment for those who betray positions of ultimate trust. When someone sworn to protect national security becomes a threat to it, traditional concepts of justice become complicated. These 8 CIA officers represent more than individual failures. They're symptoms of broader challenges facing intelligence agencies in democratic societies. How do you maintain secrecy while ensuring accountability? How do you recruit individuals capable of operating in morally ambiguous situations without attracting those who will exploit that ambiguity for personal gain? The reforms implemented after these cases may prevent some future betrayals, but they cannot eliminate the fundamental human vulnerabilities that make insider threats possible. As long as intelligence agencies rely on human beings with access to sensitive information, the potential for betrayal will remain. Which of these cases shocked you the most? Do you think these sentences represent true justice for the crimes committed? Should someone like Kiriakou, who exposed torture, receive the same treatment as those who committed espionage for money? And perhaps most importantly, do you believe such levels of betrayal could still happen today? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe to Savage Case Files for more investigations into the dark side of those we trust most. Because, in the world of intelligence, the most dangerous enemies often carry the same badge as the heroes.